The worst part about living in a dorm isn't the noise or the lack of privacy. It's realizing that sometimes the person you trusted most is the one you should have feared. These are 4 real stories from college students who survived something they never saw coming. Story 1. The roommate application. I applied to Westbrook University because it was far from home and had a great psychology program. What I didn't expect was how lonely the first few weeks would feel. My assigned roommate never showed up, so I had a double room all to myself. At first, I loved the space and the quiet. But by the 3rd week, the silence started to feel heavy. That's when I saw the flyer on the community board in the student union. Looking for a roommate, quiet, clean, respectful. Female preferred. Contact Iris. There was a phone number written at the bottom. I texted her that same afternoon. She responded within minutes, saying she'd love to meet up. We agreed to grab coffee the next day at a cafe near campus. Iris was soft-spoken, pale, and wore oversized sweaters that made her look smaller than she was. She had light brown hair pulled into a messy bun and barely made eye contact. She told me she was a transfer student studying literature. She said she'd been staying with a relative off campus, but wanted to be closer to school. Everything about her seemed normal, maybe even a little shy. I liked that she wasn't loud or invasive. We moved her in that weekend. She didn't have much, just 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a small box of books. I helped her unpack and even lent her some extra bedding. For the first 2 weeks, everything was fine. She was quiet, kept to herself, and always cleaned up after herself. But then I started noticing small things. She would stare at me sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. Not in a friendly way, but in a way that made my skin crawl. I'd turn around while studying and catch her eyes locked on me from across the room. She'd quickly look away and pretend she was reading. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom. When I came back, I saw her sitting upright in her bed, facing me in the dark. Her eyes were open, unblinking. I whispered her name, but she didn't respond. I convinced myself she was sleepwalking, or maybe just half asleep. But the next morning, she acted completely normal, like nothing happened. A few days later, I came back to the dorm after class and found her going through my desk drawers. She didn't hear me come in. I stood there frozen, watching her flip through my notebooks and open my pencil case. When I finally spoke, she jumped and spun around, her face flushed. "I was just looking for a pen," she said quickly. "You could have asked," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. After that, I started locking my valuables in a small safe I kept under my bed. I also began staying out later, avoiding the room as much as possible. One evening, I got a text from my friend Casey, asking if I wanted to stay over at her place. I said yes immediately. I didn't tell Iris I wouldn't be coming back that night. The next morning, I returned to the dorm around 10 a.m. When I opened the door, I froze. Iris was asleep in my bed, not hers mine. She was curled up under my blankets, her head on my pillow. My stomach turned. I loudly cleared my throat, and she stirred awake. She looked at me, confused, like she didn't understand why I was upset. "I missed you," she said softly. "You need to get out of my bed," I said, my voice shaking. She slowly got up and went back to her side of the room without another word. That night, I went to the RAA and requested an emergency room change. I didn't go into full detail, but I said I didn't feel safe. They told me it would take a few days to process. I stayed with Casey again that night. When I finally came back to grab some clothes the next afternoon, I found something that made my blood run cold. Taped to the inside of my closet door was a collage. It was made entirely of photos of me. Photos I didn't even know existed. Me walking to class, me at the library, me asleep in bed. Some were taken from across the room. Others were taken from outside our dorm window. I ripped it down, grabbed my things, and ran. I reported everything to campus security. They searched the room and found a folder on her laptop labeled with my full name. Inside were hundreds more photos, screenshots of my social media, saved images from my Instagram, even notes about my daily schedule. Iris was removed from campus housing that same day. I later found out from the housing office that she wasn't even a registered student. She had lied about everything. No one knew who she really was or how she got onto campus in the first place. I never saw her again. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder if she's out there watching someone else. Story 2. The library study room. I used to love pulling all-nighters at the library during finals week. There was something peaceful about being there when the building was nearly empty. Just the hum of the heating system and the faint glow of desk lamps. It was my senior year, and I had 3 exams back-to-back. I booked one of the private study rooms on the 4th floor for the entire night. The 4th floor was the quietest. Most students avoided it because the elevator didn't always work and the stairwell was dimly lit. But I didn't mind. I liked the isolation. I got there around 9 p.m. with my backpack stuffed full of textbooks, notes, and snacks. The library closed to the public at midnight, but students with after-hours access could stay until 6 a.m. I scanned my ID at the front desk and headed upstairs. The 4th floor was completely deserted. The study room I reserved was at the far end of the hall, tucked into a corner. It had a small window that overlooked the campus quad and a glass door that faced the hallway. I set up my stuff, plugged in my laptop, and got to work. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I looked up and saw a man walking past my door. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't look like a student. He stopped in front of my door and stood there, staring in at me. I pretended not to notice and kept my eyes on my laptop screen. After a few seconds, he walked away. I exhaled, my heart pounding. I told myself he was probably just another student or maybe a janitor. But something about the way he stared at me felt wrong. At midnight, the main lights in the library shut off automatically, leaving only the emergency exit lights glowing. My study room had its own light switch, so I kept it on. I tried to focus on my notes, but I kept glancing at the door. Around 1 a.m., I heard the footsteps again. This time, they stopped right outside my door. I looked up. The man was back. He was standing inches from the glass, his face close enough that I could see his breath fogging up the surface. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. I grabbed my phone and pretended to text someone, hoping he'd think I wasn't alone. He tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to figure out what I was doing. Then he tried the door handle. It was locked. Thank God it was locked. He pulled on it twice, testing it. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I stood up and shouted through the glass, "The library's closed. You need to leave." He didn't say anything. He just smiled. Then he walked away, disappearing into the dark hallway. I immediately called campus security. The dispatcher told me an officer would be there in 10 minutes. I stayed on the line, too terrified to hang up. I kept my eyes on the door, watching for any movement. About 5 minutes later, I saw a flashlight beam moving down the hallway. I felt a wave of relief, but then I realized something. The light was coming from the wrong direction. Campus security would have come from the stairwell near the elevator. This light was coming from the back emergency exit, the same exit that was supposed to be locked after hours. I crouched down under the desk, my phone still pressed to my ear. The dispatcher was asking me if I could see the officer yet. I whispered, "Someone's coming, but I don't think it's security." The footsteps grew louder. The flashlight beam stopped right outside my door. I held my breath. Then I heard a voice. "Campus security. You called about an intruder? I exhaled, my whole body trembling. I stood up and unlocked the door. A young officer stepped inside, shining his flashlight around the room. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, barely able to speak. He told me another officer was checking the building and that I should pack up my things and leave. He walked me downstairs and waited with me until my friend came to pick me up. The next day, I got an email from the library administration. They reviewed the security footage. The man I saw wasn't a student. He wasn't a janitor. He had followed me into the building and waited on the 4th floor for hours. They found the back emergency exit door propped open with a small piece of wood. He had planned it. He knew exactly what he was doing. They never identified him. He didn't show up on any other cameras. I never went back to that library alone, and I never stayed past midnight again. Story 3. The wellness check. My best friend in college was a guy named Oliver. We met freshman year in a philosophy course and instantly clicked. He was smart, funny, and a little weird in the best way. We spent hours talking about life, death, and everything in between. By junior year, we were inseparable. We lived in the same apartment complex, just 2 floors apart. Oliver struggled with depression, but he was open about it. He went to therapy, took his medication, and seemed to be managing. But that semester, something changed. He started missing classes. He stopped answering texts. When I'd knock on his door, he'd either ignore me or crack it open just enough to say he was fine. I knew he wasn't. One night, after a week of radio silence, I decided to do a wellness check. I texted him first, telling him I was coming over. No response. I went upstairs and knocked on his door. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. "Oliver, it's me. Open up." I heard shuffling inside, then the sound of the lock clicking. The door opened, but only a few inches. Oliver stood in the gap, his face pale and hollow. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm fine," he said flatly. "You don't look fine. I just need to be alone right now. Ollie, please, let me in." He hesitated, then sighed and opened the door wider. The apartment was a disaster. Empty food containers everywhere, blinds drawn shut, and a strange smell I couldn't place. "Jesus, man, when's the last time you opened a window?" He didn't answer. He sat down on the couch and stared at the floor. I sat next to him, trying to figure out what to say. "Do you want to talk about it?" "There's nothing to talk about." "Then just let me sit here with you." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then I noticed something on the coffee table. A small notebook, open to a page filled with frantic handwriting. I leaned closer to read it. The words didn't make sense at first. "It's watching me. It knows I see it. It wants me to follow. Oliver, what is this?" He looked at me, his eyes hollow and unfocused. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." He shook his head. "It started 3 weeks ago. I keep seeing someone standing outside my window at night." "Have you called the police?" "It's not a person." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it doesn't move like a person. It just stands there, staring." "Oliver, you need to talk to your therapist about this." I did. "They think I'm having an episode, but I know what I saw." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe him, but everything about this felt wrong. "Have you been taking your meds?" He nodded. "Every day." I stayed with him for another hour, trying to get him to eat something. Before I left, I made him promise to call me if he needed anything. He said he would. That was the last normal conversation we ever had. 2 days later, I got a call from campus police. Oliver's IRA had found his apartment door wide open. He was gone. His phone, wallet, and keys were still inside, but he was nowhere to be found. They searched the building, the campus, and the surrounding area. Nothing. I went back to his apartment with the police. That's when I saw it, on the window fingerprints. But they were on the outside of the glass. We were on the 4th floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape, just a straight drop to the concrete below. They never found Oliver. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that notebook, and I wonder if he really did see something. Something that was waiting for him to follow. Story 4. The off-campus house my sophomore year, I moved into an off-campus house with 3 other people. It was an old Victorian-style place with creaky floors and drafty windows. But the rent was cheap, and it was only a 10-minute walk to campus. My housemates were cool 2 guys, Jamie and Eric, and another girl named Simone. We got along great. For the first few months, everything was perfect. But then we started noticing things. Small things at first. Doors that we swore we'd closed would be open. Lights would turn on by themselves in the middle of the night. We joked about it being a ghost. But the jokes stopped when we found the door. It was in the basement. We didn't go down there often because it was unfinished and full of junk left by previous tenants. But one day, Jamie went down to check the circuit breaker. He came back up looking pale. "There's a door behind all the boxes," he said. "So?" Eric shrugged. "It's padlocked." From the outside, we all went down to see it. Sure enough, hidden behind old furniture and stacks of boxes was a narrow wooden door. It had a heavy padlock on it, rusty and old. Why would someone lock a door from the outside? Simone asked. None of us had an answer. We tried to open it, but the lock wouldn't budge. Eric suggested we cut it off. We got some bolt cutters from the hardware store and went back down. It took a few tries, but we finally snapped the lock. The door creaked open. Inside was a small room, no bigger than a closet. The walls were covered in scratches. Deep, frantic scratches, like someone had been clawing at them. In the corner was a dirty mattress and a metal bucket. The smell was unbearable. We backed out immediately. "We need to call someone," Simone said. "Who?" "The landlord," Jamie asked. "The police," I said. We called the non-emergency line and explained what we found. An officer came by that evening and took a look. He seemed disturbed, but said there wasn't much he could do without evidence of a crime. He suggested we ask the landlord about it. We did. The landlord claimed he didn't know anything about it. He said the house had been rented out to different tenants for years, and he'd never been in the basement. We didn't believe him. That night, none of us could sleep. We all stayed in the living room, talking about what we should do. Around 2 a.m., we heard it. A low, rhythmic thumping sound. It was coming from the basement. We looked at each other, frozen. "Is someone down there?" Eric whispered. Jamie grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat. We slowly made our way down the stairs. The thumping grew louder. It was coming from behind the door we'd unlocked. Jamie shined the flashlight into the room. It was empty, but the thumping continued. Then we realized it was coming from inside the walls. We ran. We packed our things that night and left. We broke our lease and never went back. I don't know what was in that house, but I know we weren't alone. So what would you do if you found a locked room in your basement? Would you open it or leave it alone? Let me know in the comments. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Hit the like button if these stories creeped you out, and subscribe for more true horror stories. There's a lot more where this came from. Stay safe out there.